Welcome, Motenta people. The name Sean Connery. It doesn't quite hit as the iconic Bond introduction, but Sean Connery was by no means iconic. He began a new type of cinematic revolution, introducing the iconic James Bond to the screen. Sean brought hope to a bleak period in the world and looked good doing it. But Sean by no means perfect. There was that unfortunate Playboy interview he gave, but it turned out it wasn't enough to diminish his legacy and image. Squaring up to a gangster had given him the image of a no-nonsense total action star. However, as Sean would come to learn, it's not wise to deck a wise guy. Sean Connery, Hollywood's macho man, who had gangsters trembling in fear. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Motenta's channel. Lindsay DePaul found his soft side endearing, and Polish model Magna Konopa flirted with him, although Konopa came at the latter part of his career when he had all that James Bond fame. Still, before that, Sean Connery was a total beefcake, with a body trained with a childhood of hard labor and teenage years filled with weightlifting. So it's not unusual that men didn't feel safe with their women around Sean Connery and his vigor. But what is unusual is trying to off Sean because of this. That was what Johnny Stompanato did. And well, what a dramatic moment that was. Johnny was a wise guy. He was formerly a soldier who saw action in the Second World War and fell in love with a woman who he eventually abandoned for a faster approach to wealth. So Johnny joined Mickey Cohen's gang, rising through the ranks, and also becoming Cohen's bodyguard and enforcer. Johnny's front was a pottery shop, and he wasn't fooling anyone with it. He got arrested multiple times, but nothing stuck. Stompanato had a tough reputation, and through Mickey, he became familiar with the Hollywood scene, even forming relationships with some of its stars. He had Ava Gardner in his sights, much to Frank Sinatra's dismay, and moved on to Lana Turner. Lana did date some dangerous men, but none were on the level as Johnny. Although to be fair to Lana, Johnny did begin the relationship with trickery, and Lana saw things in him that didn't let her cast him out. But she knew Johnny was bad for her, so when the chance came for her to cut and run, she took it. The opportunity came in the form of the film Another Time, Another Place in London. The sexy actress may have thought the distance would be enough to make Johnny bored and move on to another woman, but she was wrong. The star alongside her, Turner, picked Sean Connery, an actor who was only 3 years into his career, for the part of her love interest. And then the rumors about the two doing some off-the-set shenanigans came, fueled by Lana's nature of betting men and Connery's irresistible masculinity. In addition, the two stars went together to different London restaurants, which many people felt were dates. Hollywood and rumors were two peas in a pod, and before Lana and Connery knew it, word of their on-screen dalliance and off-screen restaurant visits had reached Johnny's ears, and the wise guy didn't like what he was hearing. He was the man that charmed women from their men, and not the other way around. Plus, Lana was one of his cash sources, and he wasn't about to lose that. In his rage, Johnny picked up the phone and called London. He threatened violence against Lana, promising to do some despicable things to her. Lana took these threats seriously. She lost her father to mob attacks and was worried that Johnny would make good on his threats. She was correct. Johnny wanted to make good on his threats, but he didn't mean to attack her. He had only one person in his sight, and it was Sean Connery. Johnny flew to London and appeared on the film's set. She told him to go away from the set, but the enforcer had other plans on his mind. He had concealed a gun in his clothes to be used at a moment's notice. The wise guy watched as Lana and Sean Connery went over their takes, which involved some romantic moments on a couch. Johnny's face saw red, and he approached Sean, pointing a gun at him, and instructing him to take his hands off his woman. Well, the wise guy would come to learn that what he did wasn't very wise. Sean was a macho man with a strong body honed with military experience. Faster than Johnny could blink, and true to his career as an action star, Sean grabbed Johnny's hand, twisted the weapon free, and launched a powerful punch in Johnny's face. Turner then called the police on the guy and he got deported to the United States. Sean must have thought the drama was over, but if only he knew. Turner returned to the United States and tried to remove Johnny from her life. She was very clear that she didn't want him when she didn't invite him to go to the Oscars with her. This is where the story gets tricky. According to Turner, Johnny came home and a big fight happened, which led to Turner's daughter accidentally sinking a knife into Johnny's chest. However, according to some sources, Turner stabbed the mob enforcer out of anger and was told to say that her daughter did it, so she would escape jail. Whichever it was, Mickey Cohen was livid. He felt there was no accident in Johnny's death and vowed retribution. Then the opportunity for retribution came. The man who was responsible for embarrassing Stompanato in London had come to America. Letters of how Johnny felt about Sean's closeness with Lana and her daughter had surfaced in the news, painting a fat target on Sean's back. Sean Connery had come for the Disney film Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Then a chilling call came in. "Get out of town or a contract will be put on your life," the caller said. The tough action star was stunned. Disney execs took the threat seriously and hid their leading man until they could sort things out. For Connery, being eye candy had become problematic for him. But in his career, it did allow him to have some of the steamiest relationships with the hottest actresses. Besides, his encounter with Johnny Stompanato wasn't the first time he would tango with a gang. Back in the UK, he had grappled with the Valdor gang and didn't so much as lose a finger. Let's tell you all about that, but before then, let's take you through his childhood to put things in perspective. Thomas Sean Connery's origin was far from the suave man he portrayed as James Bond. He was born to Joseph and Euphemia Connery. He grew up dirt poor with his parents, unable to afford a house that had a bathroom. Also, there was only so much work that his truck driver father could do when the whole country was heading to war. So the action hero lived a gritty life, getting a job when he was 8 as a milkman, or a boy in this case. Then the war came in 1939, and if you thought the actor had a tough life, it became even tougher. He had to leave school when he was 13, taking to the streets working one job or the other, but getting a job wasn't always easy. Not finishing school meant he didn't have the qualifications he needed for some jobs, so he did a lot of manual work just to get by. Apart from being a milkman or boy, he was a cement mixer, a laborer, and a steel bender. He did any job that needed doing. It wasn't a surprise that when he clocked 16, he went straight into the Royal Navy, which was better than the life he left behind, and he was in for the long haul. Sadly, life had other plans for him as he only spent 3 years in the Army. Sean was discharged from the Army as he was diagnosed with an ulcer that got in the way of him discharging his duties as a soldier. He didn't leave the Army empty-handed. Sean got a Navy disability grant which he put to good use. He used the money to plan his life after the Army, learning wood polishing. Soon he began to work on coffins, furnitures, and sideboards. But these weren't enough to make a living on. He needed more jobs, but to get these jobs, he had to have a strapping figure. So Sean began to work on his physique, buffing up his body. The results were more than impressive. At 6'2", Sean became a hulking figure with rippling muscles. He got to work as a bodyguard and as a lifeguard due to his incredible physique. When winter came around, he leaned towards the artistic. And by artistic, we mean he posed almost nude as a model for the Edinburgh Art College. Sean described his model days as very arduous, quite a good discipline. Sean continued to improve his body up to the point that he was Mr. Universe material. When the Mr. Universe competition was held in London, he traveled there to participate. But as well-built as he was, he came in third. It turned out to be one of the best losses that could have happened to him. Coming in third gave him the motivation he needed to look for another job. This time, it was an audition for South Pacific. Although he had interacted with the stage before as a maintenance man, it was one of the many jobs he did. Surprisingly, he got the part as a chorus member and toured Britain with a company he auditioned with. But he soon realized he was severely lacking and that if he aimed to excel as an entertainer, he must fill the gaps in his education. And so, he set out to do exactly that. Anytime they toured a new location, he visited the library there, and when he finished at the library, he performed. He read different works, including artistic ones, including Shakespeare, Joyce, Ibsen, and Stanislavski. As he educated himself, he changed some of his mannerisms, starting with his diction. Then work began to trickle in with small parts here and there, some TV roles, and a brawl with gangsters. His brawl with the gangsters was one of the memorable periods of his life. He was in Scotland having fun in a snooker and pool club when some members of the infamous Valdor spotted him dressed in a beautiful leather jacket. They approached him and told him to take the jacket off, but Sean refused and escaped from the club. He thought he had successfully escaped, but he was wrong. The Valdor gang had relentless members, and they tracked Connery down that night, determined to hurt him. They found him, asked for the jacket, and were ready to take Connery to a world of hurt. But they didn't know this. The hunter was about to become the hunted. They came at the brawny actor not knowing he had lots of experience with bar brawls when he was a bodyguard. He swiftly dispatched his attackers. But they weren't done with him yet. The gang was impressed by Connery's skill and showed respect to him. They even invited him to join their gang, but he refused. Politely, of course. The encounter with the Valdor gang was more interesting than the badly directed and cheesy movies he took part in early in his career. But the good thing was, he managed to shine in those films. It was in one of those cheesy films that he met the man who would later direct the first James Bond movie, Terrence Young. Young was the one that encouraged Sean to continue and not give up on acting, and that if he acted enough, he would leave behind the horrible movies his career had become associated with. The strapping actor was a fighter, and he was inspired to continue pushing and acting. He did it long enough that when Albert Chubby Broccoli was trying to make a James Bond movie, his name cropped up. Chubby's wife had seen another underwhelming movie in which Sean Connery had a part. Critics were not a fan of the film, but Chubby's wife loved it to the point that she recommended Connery to her husband. It's ironic, isn't it? An underwhelming film led to Sean's biggest commercial movie success. Chubby Broccoli had seen the mood of the public on Ian Fleming's James Bond novel. The book was a hit, both at home and abroad. JFK, Lee Harvey Oswald, Prince Philip, and CIA Chief Allen Dulles were all big fans of the book. Lee was said to have frequented the library to borrow Bond novels. The film was highly anticipated, but Ian Fleming wasn't looking forward to it. He didn't want Sean Connery for the part. He's not what I envisioned of James Bond looks, and I'm looking for a commander Bond and not an overgrown stuntman. That was a pretty harsh assessment of Sean. He was far more than the kind of actor Ian Fleming had in mind, but Connery had come this far against all odds. After the first film, Dr. No, came out, Ian Fleming took his words back. Sean delivered an authentic performance that dazed Mr. Fleming. The fact that Sean did all his stunts rubbed it in for Ian Fleming. Sean must have felt satisfied even as he almost lost his life in one of the stunts. Fleming then used Sean's image for subsequent James Bond novels, making James Bond a half-Scottish, half-Swiss ancestry in later books. Sean became the hottest man all over the world, appearing in more James Bond films. But his love life was nothing to write home about. It was a tumultuous kind, but just like his career, there was a happy ever after waiting at the end for him. Having a stable relationship looked like something that would elude the sturdy 6'2" star. He became a sex symbol, and we know how distracting being a sex symbol can be. Sean's relationship raffle-draw began with the raven-haired ballerina, Carol Stroop. The relationship with Stroop was a passionate one, and it began when they met during the production of South Pacific. But Stroop's parents were not a fan of Connery, and they ensured their daughter broke off the relationship with him. Sean was so in love with her that he proposed, but their love wasn't to be. Then Sean met the woman who would become his next girlfriend, photographer Julie Hamilton, who Sean was living with at the time. Julie wasn't a fan of Sean, who she thought was boring, but in the end, she ended up falling for him and their relationship was a dramatic one. Some of the drama was caused by Sean's infatuation with Diane Salento. Sean and the woman who would be his first wife, Salento, met on the set of a film. Salento was married and pregnant to Andrew Volpi, an Italian writer. Connery was drawn in by Salento to the extent that he talked about her beauty with his girlfriend, which of course led to an argument. Eventually, he and Julie broke up, freeing him to be with Diane Salento. He and Salento would later get married, but after 11 years together, they went their separate ways. Salento would later lose her life to cancer. Then the Bond actor would go on to have some flings. There was one with Bond girl Jill St. John, who Connery dated briefly before his divorce with Salento was finalized. There was also a secret, well, not so secret relationship with Bond girl Lana Wood, Natalie Wood's sister. The couple kept the relationship hidden, but there were some clues about how intense their on-screen chemistry was. Connery relentlessly pursued the reserved Lana, but the two eventually went their separate ways. The sexy hunk would later date Polish actress Magda Konopa. Magda was the one who turned the heat on Connery, and they shared some romantic evenings. The actor married Micheline Roquebrune, who he first met when he had just separated from Diane. They had an intense connection that eventually led to the two getting into a relationship, despite not speaking the same language. However, Sean had entered so far into his Hollywood hunk image that he had an affair with Carol Mallory. The two went on a date and had some nights together, despite both being married to different people. Eventually, they called the relationship off, with Carol later saying Connery was not good in bed. Well, Carol may have thought the sexy actor wasn't a great lover, but Lindsay DePaul seemed to have felt otherwise. Lindsay was one of the hottest pop stars at the time, and she found herself giving in to the man, even when she initially wasn't attracted to him. Lindsay claimed that not only was Connery relentless in his pursuit of her, but she also found out that he had a soft aid to his brash exterior. The two would go on to have an affair for months, and eventually it became public knowledge. Micheline found out what her husband was up to, but she didn't end things with him. They remained together till Connery's death. Sean Connery lived a long life and died when he was 90 after suffering from dementia. The disease ravaged the man until the point where he could barely express himself. Sean died peacefully in his sleep, a quiet end for a man with the loudest of careers. Sean Connery didn't suffer from others trying to dominate him. He was the one who dominated. But others, however, had difficulties. How Kirk Douglas suffered from being Jewish. Let's find out from this video.